Hi, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the entire drawing process of this aesthetic eagle drawing using graphite pencils. So let's get started. As always, these are the art supplies I'm going to use for this drawing, and you can pause the video right here to note them down. I'm using this 250 GSM paper from my ordinary smooth surface sketchbook, which is available in almost all the art stores or stationeries around the world. So you don't have to use any fancy paper for this specific drawing. And the drawing portion area is 6 x 10 inches. Before moving on to the grid making process, let's mask the edges of this drawing paper using a masking tape to prevent graphite from spilling over the borders. I drew the outline using grid method, and you can find the detailed step-by-step process on my Patreon profile. Link is in the description. Okay, so now let's start the outlining process, and we can see that the right side is starting from the B6 block and extending towards the C5. So I'm adding this small stroke very carefully and gradually extending it downwards in the respective boxes using an 8B pencil. Notice that I'm also adding some spots for the darker fur tufts, because after shading the grid will fade away and it will become difficult for us to locate their position without the grid. Add these small arcs on the right side to mimic the shape of the eye. And I'm also shading and adding the base for fur tufts for the head portion to create a 3D base along with the outlining process. Notice that I'm also keeping the pressure high for darker areas and then gradually decreasing it to add a light base around them using the same 8B pencil. I will call this pressure technique, which can help you save time and improve your drawing skills. So the process is pretty much the same. Just keep on relating to the reference image and trace the outline in the respective grid boxes. And keep on adding a mixture of curved lines and strokes to mimic the side of the beak. And don't forget to change the size and direction of these directional strokes for the fur, depending upon the area you're working on. And by the way, you can get access to our premium content and support this channel through Patreon. You can sign up through different membership levels and get access to all the outlines and grid references, etc. We have an ever-growing library of hundreds of exclusive and real-time tutorials. And you will also get access to 4 new tutorials every month. You can also post your artworks in our active community of patrons and participate in our weekly critique sessions where I give my honest and positive critiques on your artworks, so you can improve your skills and get better with your drawing. Visit the link in description and become a premium member today. It has always been my goal to provide free tutorials and information on drawing and art related tools to general public. And keeping with that theme, I would like to thank all these incredible individuals who backed our channel on Patreon last month. Their generous support enabled me to produce this free tutorial for all of you guys. Okay, so when you are done with the 3D base, let's embed the graphite into its place. And for that, add a layer over the whole upper portion using 2H pencil. And I call this graphite locking technique. I keep the pressure and angle on my pencil low. And along with embedding the graphite into its place, it will also help fill any empty spots in between and make the shade look shiny and dark. Now it's time to blend the base layer, and for that I'm using my medium-sized dry brush and going over this whole portion. Notice that I'm using circular motion while blending this layer to avoid patchiness. Some of the darker details faded away during the blending process, so I'm adjusting them using my 8B pencil very carefully. You can lightly go over this layer using a medium-sized dry brush to make it appear more smoother. Okay, so as the 3D base is done, it's time to start the highlighting process. And for that, I will be using my sandwich technique. I'm using my flat tip mono zero eraser and going over the lighter areas in between the darker ones. Just flick your eraser and add these strokes, keeping the pressure higher in the start. And then reduce it as you flick it to achieve a stroke without blunt ends. There are some fur that are a bit softer, so to mimic such an effect, I'm switching my eraser and now using perfection eraser. I'm carefully extending some of these previous strokes along with adding the new ones. And for the thinner strokes, I'm sharpening the tip of my mono zero eraser by rubbing it vertically on a sandpaper. This way, you will achieve sharp corners all around the tip, which are perfect for adding thin highlights, and you also don't have to sharpen the tip again and again. Just rotate the eraser and keep erasing until all the sharp corners are used. Notice that I'm also adjusting some of the darker details that faded away during the highlighting process. Okay, so now to make some of these highlights brighter, I'm using my sharp tip electric eraser and going over the previous highlights very carefully. I'm also adding a few dots of random sizes in between the previous highlights to make the area look more realistic and 3D. Moving on to the lower portion, and as we can see that this area has softer first strokes. So I'm using my perfection eraser. I'm also adding these small dots in between the first strokes to create a base for the water droplets. And for the brighter texture, I'm shifting towards my flat tip mono zero eraser and adding the required strokes. Okay, now it's time to add water droplets and some brighter first strokes. And for that, I'm using my sharp tip electric eraser. So the process is pretty much the same as we did earlier. Keep on layering the softer and brighter strokes to achieve the required fur tufts. This upper right portion has very thin fur, so to create such an effect, I'm rubbing my mono zero eraser over the sandpaper and creating a flat tip. And now by using the edge of this flat tip, I'm carefully adding these straight yet slant lines close together. Okay, so now I'm using my sharp tip 8p pencil and going in between these brighter strokes to make them even more crisp and even. The right side of the stroke is a bit shiny in the reference image, so I'm using my flat tip electric eraser and going over these strokes. And look how shiny and 3D this fur texture has started to look, just like the way we wanted here. Okay, so moving on to the eye, and first of all, I'm cleaning the spill of the graphite from the top right side of the eye. And now I'm adding a light base in this white portion using my B pencil. I'm applying higher pressure on the area near the iris and gradually decreasing it as I move away to create a smooth gradient. And notice that I'm also adding the reflection of fur in this portion to give it a more realistic look. Okay, so now it's time to add the texture, and for that I'm adding the cluster of small dots in this whole portion using an electric eraser. I'm keeping the size and shape random to keep the texture more on the natural side. Notice that I'm also adding these dots close together to achieve the required texture. When the lighter texture is in its place, I'm layering darker dots in between the lighter ones using an 8p pencil to give this whole area a more 3D look. The edges of the iris are looking a bit too sharp, so I'm going along the outer and inner edge using my sharp tip perfection eraser. And look how blended it has started to look, just like the way we wanted here. Some of the details faded away, so I'm adjusting them using my tools. This right side of the eye has a brighter ring, so I'm firstly picking up the excess graphite using my perfection eraser. And now to make it look brighter, I'm going over it using my mono zero eraser. I am moving my hand in small back and forth motions to effectively pick up this graphite. Now to add some texture, I'm using my sharp tip electric eraser and adding these small dots of random sizes along the curved highlight we just added. The right side of the eye has some feathers, so to achieve such an effect, I'm firstly adding these smaller first strokes along the edge of this brighter highlight. And notice that I'm flicking my mono zero eraser in one go to achieve brighter stroke with a thin end. And now to create the softer look, I'm adding these strokes using perfection eraser by keeping the pressure very low. I'm again using the flicking method to avoid blunt ends. Now when the basic texture is in its place, I'm adding some final touches to the area. And look how realistic it has started to look. Okay, now moving on to the lower portion, and let's continue the outline, and I'm adding these small curved strokes to mimic the shape of the beak. Okay, so when the outline is done, let's add the base layer in this whole bottom portion. And as we can see that this right side is pitch black in the reference image, so I'm scraping my 8p pencil and converting it into powder. And now I'm using this powder to shade the area with a bigger sized dry brush in circular motions. Now the lower portion of the beak has some darker texture, so I'm adding these dots of random shape and sizes using my 8p pencil. And now adding a base layer using my 8p powder. To create 3D base, I'm shifting towards my medium sized draw brush and layering graphite to achieve required depth. When the base is in its place, it's time to blend it. And for that, I'm using a soft tissue paper and going over this whole area. Okay, so now it's time to add the missing darker details, and as always, I'm using my 8p pencil by maintaining a low angle. I'm going along the edges of the beak and shading the area by keeping the pressure variable. This will help us in achieving a perfect dark to light gradient. I'm also adding this missing darker texture over the nostril using the same 8B pencil. Some of the areas are looking patchy, so I'm using my medium-sized dry brush and going over them to blend them lightly. Okay, so now let's add dimension to the beak, and for that I'm erasing the spill of the graphite from this upper portion using my perfection eraser. I'm increasing the pressure on my eraser for some areas that are brighter in the reference image. And when you are satisfied with the lighter texture, you can blend it using tissue paper later on. The highlight on the upper portion of the beak looks a bit less bright to me. So to make it more prominent, I'm using my kneaded eraser. I'm going along the edge and then lightly moving my hands downward, just like this. Now I'm shifting towards my mono zero eraser to add some intricate highlights, because you can have more control on it. I'm adding some final touches to the highlights on the beak using my electric and kneaded eraser. And look how realistic it has started to look. Okay, so the process for the rest of the beak is almost the same as we did earlier. So I'm following those steps and adding these highlights very carefully. And the area above the beak has a patchy texture in the form of irregular dots. So I'm using my kneaded eraser to add base highlights. I have kneaded it into a thin round tip and now lightly dabbing it over the required areas to create such dotted texture. As the base of the highlights are done, it's time to define some of the texture, and I'm using my perfection eraser for this purpose. I'm moving my hand in small circular motions to make the highlights look more bright. Notice that I'm also going over some of these dots and picking up the graphite from their center using my mono zero eraser to make them look more shiny. And for the portion on the right side of the beak, I'm adding some textural dots to mimic the skin texture. The highlights are looking a bit dull to me, so to make them more bright, I'm going over them using my sharp tip electric eraser. I'm also adding some new dots and strokes, and look how detailed the texture has started to look. Okay, so it's time to add the long hair texture, and for that I'm using my 3B pencil. I'm rubbing it on a scraper to create a sharp chisel tip, and now using it to add these hair strokes very carefully. Notice that I'm placing the tip of my pencil on the spot from where I want the hair stroke to start and then flicking my pencil in one go. This will help us in achieving an even stroke with a needle-like thin end. I'm changing the length and direction of these strokes according to the area I'm working on. The area under the eye has denser hair, so I'm adding these longer strokes close together to achieve the required results. And keep on adding these strokes for the rest of the portion, but keep the length and direction in mind and adjust them according to the area you're working on. Okay, so now to make these hairs stand out even more, I'm using my mono zero eraser and adding these lighter strokes right beside the darker ones. And look how these lighter strokes made the hair pop up, just like the way we wanted here. Okay, so moving on to the next portion, and I'm adding these feather base using my perfection eraser, just like the way I did earlier. And for the lower portion, I'm adding thin strokes for the feather using sharp tip of my perfection eraser. And now to make these highlights even more bright, I'm going over the previous ones using my mono zero eraser. And notice that I've created a flat tip to achieve thin and needle-like strokes. I'm also adding the cluster of brighter dots of random sizes using my electric eraser. And now it's time to top this area with the hair strokes, and I'm following the similar process as I did for the upper portion. The only difference here is that for the lighter portion, I'm using my graphite pencil, and for the darker portion, I will shift towards the mono zero eraser. And for the final touches, I'm sharpening the tip of my electric eraser and now adding these small dots and strokes on the area under the eye. And with this last step, we are done with this easy eagle drawing. Creating these free drawing tutorials needs a significant amount of time and energy. So if you found this one valuable, please show your support by liking this video. Your support keeps me inspired to bring you more creative content. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.